He held out a necklace and said, "Isn't it pretty, Ma? I got it for Dana. I sold your old ring to pay for it." I felt the blood drain from my face. My ring, the one his father gave me on our wedding night. The last piece of him I had left gone just like that. I always thought I was his hero, his everything. But in that moment I realized I was just another thing he thought he could trade. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply looked at him and decided what I had to do next. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. It wasn't always like this. I live in a small yellow house at the end of Sycamore Street, just a few blocks from the grocery store, the post office, and the church I stopped attending after Harold died. It's a quiet place now. Too quiet some days. I can hear the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the porch swing even when no one's sitting on it. Every evening I set the table for one, pour a cup of chamomile tea, and let it go cold while I stare out the window. I pretend I'm waiting for someone. But I've long since stopped expecting anyone to walk through that door. I used to believe silence was peaceful. But there's a difference between peace and loneliness. Silence is beautiful when you've earned your rest. But when silence replaces laughter, footsteps, voices, it feels like punishment. My son Mason used to come by every Sunday. "Just to check in, Ma," he'd say. But just to check in turned into "too busy this weekend, and then maybe next month." And now? He only comes when he needs something, money mostly. Or when Dana, his wife, wants to show off a new outfit and needs someone to praise her. That someone used to be me. Now she barely acknowledges my presence unless she wants something. It wasn't always like this. Mason was a sweet boy once. He used to bring me dandelions clutched in his little fists, yelling, "For you, Mama!" like they were diamonds. On Christmas mornings, he'd sit on Harold's lap and tell me how he wanted to buy me a mansion when he grew up. I never wanted a mansion. I just wanted those mornings to last forever. But life doesn't ask you what you want. It just moves forward. And sometimes it leaves you behind. There was a time just a few years ago when Mason needed a down payment for his first home. I took out part of my retirement savings. Didn't hesitate. "You've worked hard your whole life," he said, kissing my forehead. "I'll pay you back, Ma. I promise." I never asked him to. I didn't need the money. I needed the connection. I needed to believe that our bond was stronger than bank balances. But I was wrong. The day he told me he sold my ring, my wedding ring, he didn't even flinch. His voice was casual. "It's not like you wore it anymore, Ma." I figured it was just collecting dust. I wanted to scream. It wasn't collecting dust. It was collecting memories. Every time I opened that velvet box, I could feel Harold's hand in mine again. I could hear his voice whispering, "Forever, Helen." But Mason never asked. He just sold it. Pawned it, probably, for a shiny little chain that his wife would wear once and then toss into a drawer. I didn't say a word that day. I sat on the edge of my bed after they left, holding the empty ring box in my lap, feeling like a widow all over again. My hands trembled as I closed it. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow. You give your life to your children. Every breath, every heartbeat, every dime. And still somehow they grow up thinking you owe them more. There are photos on my mantle. Mason as a baby, Harold holding him high in the air, both of them laughing. I dust them every week. Sometimes I talk to them. Just soft words. Little updates about the garden or how the tomatoes are doing this year. No one listens to me anymore, not really. At the last family dinner, I tried to tell Dana about the rose bush that finally bloomed again after Harold planted it 25 years ago. She blinked at me, smiled a plastic smile, and turned back to her phone. I was invisible. You can feel it in your bones when you're not wanted. They speak to you kindly, but their eyes are already past you, looking at their plates or their phones or each other. Never at you. And when you try to reclaim space, when you suggest a birthday gathering or a lunch date, they're too busy. Or already booked. Or next time, Ma, promise. There's always a next time, until one day there isn't. That morning after he told me about the ring, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the cold tea I hadn't touched. I reached out and held the cup between my hands, hoping it might warm me. It didn't. The cup was as cold as I felt. I wondered if he even remembered the story of that ring. How Harold had worked overtime at the mill for 6 months straight just to afford it. How he proposed under that big oak tree behind my parents' barn. nervous as a schoolboy. How he had slipped it on my finger and whispered, "I know it's not much, but it's all I have and everything I am." That ring wasn't gold. It was time. It was memory. It was love that had lasted long after he was gone. And my son sold it. I looked at the empty spot on my finger that used to carry my husband's promise. And then I looked at the front door. Because I knew I couldn't let it end this way. If I didn't matter to them alive, then maybe I needed to decide what would matter when I was gone. It's strange how the past hides itself in everyday objects. Like the apron hanging behind my pantry door, still stained with cranberry sauce from Mason's favorite Thanksgiving dinner when he was 11. Or the chipped mug that says "Number 1 Mom." A Mother's Day gift he made in 3rd grade. I used to drink from that mug every morning, even when the handle broke. I glued it back together 3 times. Back then I believed love was something you proved by never letting go. Now I see. It's just as much about knowing when to stop holding on. I remember the early days, when it was just me and Mason in that old 1-bedroom apartment off Maple Drive. Harold had only been gone a year. I used to keep his jacket draped over the chair near the door, as if he'd come home any moment. But he didn't. And I had to learn how to be mother and father, nurturer and protector, teacher and breadwinner. Mason was 5 when I started working night shifts at the diner. I'd come home just in time to wake him up for school. Then I'd nap while he was in class, cook dinner, help with homework and leave again by 7. My body ached constantly, but I never let him see it. He'd sit at the table swinging his legs and drawing dinosaurs, while I packed his lunch with notes that said things like "Be brave" or "You're my sunshine." He kept them all, in a little tin box under his bed. I found it when I helped him move into his college dorm. He laughed and said, "I don't know why I kept these." But he didn't throw them away. Back then he saw me. He saw me. It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment that changed. Maybe it was when he started dating Dana. Or maybe it was earlier when he realized I'd always say yes to everything. Tuition? Of course. New car? Here's the cosign. Wedding? I'll cover the florist. Baby shower? I'll host it in my tiny yard and bake cupcakes until my hands blister. I didn't mind. Truly. I wanted to give him everything. That's what mothers do, right? But slowly those thank yous became expectations. The calls became shorter. The visits less frequent. And one day I realized I was no longer a person in their lives. I was a service. A resource. Something to be tapped when needed, then closed again. The first time I noticed the shift was after Mason and Dana bought their house. I had given them a large check for the down payment, money Harold and I had set aside for emergencies. But when I visited them a month later, Dana made a point of mentioning how we earned this with hard work, not handouts. I smiled even though my throat tightened. I didn't say that check you called a handout came from nights I spent scrubbing dishes while you were still in high school. I just nodded, because I didn't want to embarrass my son. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. The next shift came during Mason's 32nd birthday. I showed up with a photo album hand-bound with pages of his childhood. I had spent weeks organizing it, adding notes, stories, little sketches of memories. He opened it, smiled politely, and set it aside. Dana gave him a smartwatch. That was the only thing he used that day. That night I cried for the first time in years. Not because he ignored the gift, but because I realized I no longer knew how to reach him. The signs kept stacking like old bills. Quiet but undeniable. He stopped calling me Ma. It became Mom. Colder somehow, more distant. He stopped hugging me tight. Now it was a light tap on the back like a business handshake. And worst of all, he stopped asking how I was. Not just the small talk. How's your garden? Are you feeling okay? But the real stuff. No one asks me that anymore. That ring, it was more than jewelry. It was my anchor. Every time I held it, I remembered who I was, Helen Harrington, wife to Harold, mother to Mason, woman who endured and still stood tall. When I opened the ring box a few weeks ago and found it empty, I didn't scream. I didn't even gasp. I just closed it. Because the final shift had already happened. That empty box didn't shock me. It confirmed what I already knew. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more thing Harold left behind. And they had no idea what it was worth. It was Dana's birthday. I hadn't been invited, but Mason called me that morning and said, "Hey Ma, why don't you drop by for a bit? Dana would love to see you." I knew that was a lie the moment he said it. Dana never loved to see me, she tolerated me, the same way she tolerated long lines at the DMV. Necessary but irritating. Still I dressed nicely. Wore my soft blue sweater, the one Harold always said brought out my eyes. I even baked her favorite lemon pound cake from scratch. Took my time wrapping it in foil, tying it with a ribbon. The drive to their place felt longer than usual. My hands tightened on the steering wheel at every stoplight. My stomach knotted, not from nerves, but from a growing sense that something had shifted permanently, and I was the only one still pretending it hadn't. When I walked through their front door, the house was buzzing with laughter, music, and voices. Her friends from work were all there, dressed in shiny cocktail dresses and holding flutes of pink champagne. Mason greeted me with a quick side hug, already distracted. "Glad you made it, Ma. Dana's out back." Out back. Like I was an afterthought. I smiled and handed him the cake. "Where should I put this?" He blinked. "Oh, we already have a dessert table, but maybe the fridge?" The fridge. My homemade cake tucked away like leftovers. I nodded and slipped into the kitchen, careful not to let my hands shake as I opened the refrigerator door. That cold rush of air hit me hard like truth does when you stop denying it. I walked out to the backyard and there she was. Dana. Laughing with her friends, tossing her blonde hair over her shoulder, wearing a silky green dress that shimmered like envy itself. Around her neck hung a necklace I had never seen before. It caught the light, a delicate gold chain with a teardrop-shaped sapphire pendant. It was beautiful and hauntingly familiar. Dana spotted me and forced a smile. "Helen, so sweet of you to come. Isn't this necklace stunning? Mason got it for me. Said it cost a fortune." She laughed. Her friends laughed too. I didn't. Instead, I looked at Mason, who had just joined her side. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And then it hit me. That sapphire. It had once been a part of the locket Harold gave me after our honeymoon. He had it set into my wedding ring when Mason turned 10, to mark the new chapter of our lives. A new bond, new promise. I felt my stomach drop. "Mason," I said, quietly but firmly, "can I speak with you for a moment?" He followed me inside into the hallway. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Did you take my wedding ring?" I asked. He sighed. "Ma, come on, don't make this a thing. I told you I needed to get Dana something special. You weren't using the ring. It was just sitting there in that old box." I stared at him. It wasn't just sitting. It was waiting. "For what?" he snapped and then quickly added, "I mean, it's not like you wear it." "No," I said, "because I was saving it. For you. For when you were ready to remember who your father was. For when you had a son, and wanted to tell him how much love built this family." He rubbed his hands over his face. "You're overreacting. It's just a ring. Just a ring." Those 3 words tore through every memory I had tried so hard to protect. Just a ring. Was Harold just a man? Was I just a mother? Was everything I gave up, every night I stayed awake so Mason could sleep safely, just dust to him? I turned away. I couldn't let him see my eyes. Not because I was crying. I wasn't. I was done crying. Later that night, I sat on their couch as Dana opened her gifts in front of everyone. Mason handed her one last box, wrapped in gold paper with a white ribbon. She opened it dramatically, holding it up to the crowd. A diamond tennis bracelet. "Oh baby, it's gorgeous," she squealed, hugging him. "You're spoiling me," someone asked. "Where do you even find time for this kind of shopping?" And Dana, smiling wide, said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Oh, Mason's amazing. He just sold some old ring his mom had lying around. Said it wasn't even worth anything emotionally." Laughter. Light. Casual. Brutal. I felt like I had been slapped in front of the entire town. But I didn't flinch. I didn't stand up. I didn't speak. Instead, I watched the ice in my untouched glass melt slowly down to nothing. But the worst humiliation wasn't the laughter. It was what she said to me next, in front of everyone. They were slicing the cake when it happened. I was sitting alone near the edge of the backyard, tucked between the grill and a forgotten stack of folding chairs. No one had saved me a seat at the main table. Dana's friends had taken them all. I didn't mind, not at first. I thought maybe someone would notice. Maybe Mason would wave me over, say, "Come sit with us, Ma." But he didn't. Instead, he stood beside Dana as she posed for photos, her diamond bracelet catching every flash like it knew it belonged to someone else's sacrifice. When she turned to cut the cake, she looked around the patio. "Oh," she said, her voice lilting with mock surprise. "Helen, are you sitting back there? Why don't you take one of the chairs from the kids' table? You'll be more comfortable over there." Everyone turned. Half smiles. Few chuckles. I stood calmly. Smoothed my sweater. "I'm fine right here." She shrugged, as if my dignity were a minor inconvenience. "Suit yourself. I just thought you might want to be near the people your age." I froze. She said it with a smirk a little too loud, like she wanted to make sure everyone heard. My son didn't say a word. Not one. Just kept his hand on her back as she fed him a slice of cake, laughing like nothing had happened. That's when it hit me, I wasn't family anymore. I was furniture. Old furniture. The kind you keep in the garage until someone finally decides to throw it out. I don't remember how long I stayed after that. I just remember the coldness of the chair under me, the way the grass poked through the plastic slats of my sandals, the way the lights flickered as the wind picked up and no one offered me a jacket. When I finally got home, I walked straight to my bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled down the old wooden box from the top shelf. The ring box was still inside, but empty. I stared at it, remembering how Harold had once told me, "This ring may be small, Helen, but it's the strongest promise I'll ever make." I had guarded it for decades, and now it was gone. Sold. Recycled into a birthday gift for someone who called me Helen instead of Ma. That night I couldn't sleep. My body ached in places that had nothing to do with age. It was a deeper ache, the kind you feel when something sacred is broken and no one notices. So I got up, made a cup of tea, sat at the table. The cup went cold again, untouched. I thought about all the things I'd done for Mason, the overtime shifts, the birthday parties I made special even when we had no money, the college applications we filled out together at the kitchen table. And then I remembered something Dana had said 2 years ago. After they moved into their new home, I had offered to help them repaint the baby's room. They were expecting then. Dana had smiled and said, "Oh Helen, you've done enough. This house is ours now. We'll handle it." I had brushed it off. But now every word rang louder. This house is ours now. How many other things had they decided without me? I began to wonder, how much of my life had already been divided up like slices of cake at Dana's birthday? That's when I walked over to the file cabinet in the hallway and opened the drawer where I kept the deed to my house. I checked the paperwork, my fingers trembling slightly. And then I saw it, a notarized copy I hadn't remembered signing. It listed Mason's name as a future co-owner. Not my signature, but a signature that looked eerily close. I blinked, stared harder. No, it couldn't be. I reached for the folder with my original will, the one I drafted a decade ago with my lawyer, Mr. Pennington. But something felt off. There were pages missing, staples torn out, some sheets copied, others yellowing from time but in the wrong order. I sat down slowly, the papers in my lap. Had they gone behind my back? Had Mason, my son, already started planning for a future without me in it? What would you do if your own child started dividing your life before you were even gone? I asked myself that question as the tea finally cooled beside me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have an answer. But the answer came the next morning, in the form of an envelope that changed everything. The envelope was plain, no return address, no name. Just a soft, cream-colored slip sitting on my front porch like an afterthought. I almost didn't see it, tucked beneath the morning paper I hadn't subscribed to in years. It felt too light to matter. But inside was weight. It was an invitation. Thick, glossy cardstock with gold foil edges. Dana's handwriting unmistakable. A mix of bubble letters and fake sophistication. "You are invited," it read, "to a private gathering celebrating the upcoming arrival of baby Harrington number 2. Hosted by Dana's parents. Gifts encouraged. Registry link enclosed." At the bottom in fine print, "Note, please RSVP for food count. Seating is limited. Seating is limited." I held that phrase in my hand like it was a brick. Not "we'd love to have you," not "we hope you'll come," not even Nana Helen or Grandma. Just logistics. Like I was a head of cabbage they needed to account for in the salad. That was it. That was the moment the string snapped inside me. because it wasn't just a forgotten seat. It was a pattern. A design they'd sewn without me, carefully cutting me out of the picture one stitch at a time. I went to the kitchen, opened the cupboard, took down the teacup I used to use every morning, the one with the tiny pink flowers around the rim. I hadn't touched it in years. Dana had once called it clutter. I filled it, let it steam, sat down at the table. This time I drank every sip. And then, I got to work. I pulled out the file cabinet again, but this time I wasn't trembling. I wasn't nostalgic or confused. I was focused. I opened the old accordion folder labeled Estate and Legal. Mr. Pennington had helped me draft the will long ago, back when Mason was still in high school, when I had more hope than sense. I had left him everything. The house, the savings, the tiny cabin Harold and I once bought up in Wisconsin. A full inheritance. I remember Harold saying, "It's only right, Helen. He's our blood." But blood meant nothing now. I dialed the number. It rang twice. Pennington and Gray. "This is Marla." "Hi, sweetheart. This is Helen Harrington. I need to update my will." That afternoon, I sat in Mr. Pennington's office, surrounded by books, leather chairs, and the heavy smell of ink and dust. He greeted me with a warm smile. "It's been too long, Helen." I nodded. "Not long enough." We went through the documents one by one. He asked careful questions. I gave firm answers. "No, Mason will no longer be the primary beneficiary." "Yes, I'd like the house transferred to a charitable trust upon my passing." "No, I don't want them notified ahead of time." When we were done, he leaned back and looked at me. "You're sure?" I stared out the window. The sun had dipped just below the clouds. A few leaves fluttered by, even though it wasn't autumn yet. "Yes," I said. "I'm done being their safety net." That night I slept for the first time in weeks. Deep, dreamless sleep. When I woke up I didn't cry. I didn't sigh. I made tea, a fresh cup this time, and sipped it slowly, letting the warmth settle deep in my bones. I took out the old photo album from under the bed. The one with yellowed pages and fraying corners. I flipped through it, not to feel sad but to remember who I was before I was forgotten. There was a photo of Harold and me on our wedding day. He looked so young, so proud. He had written on the back, "To my Helen, you are everything they will never understand." I touched the words with the tips of my fingers, tracing the ink like it was a prayer. The ring was gone, but not the vow, not the strength. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. My reflection stared back, older, yes, worn, but not broken. There was dignity there, quiet but alive. Later that week, Mason stopped by. He knocked, holding a store-bought pie in one hand and his phone in the other. "Hey Ma, Dana wanted me to ask if you were planning to come to the baby thing. We weren't sure you got the invite." I stepped aside. "I got it." He walked in, looked around the kitchen like he hadn't been there 100 times before. "So you'll come?" "I haven't decided." He frowned. "It would mean a lot to Dana." I looked at him. Just looked. He changed the subject. "I was thinking we should talk about the house stuff soon. Just to plan ahead, you know? In case anything ever happened." I poured tea. Set one cup in front of him. "You're worried about what happens when I'm gone?" He nodded. "Well, yeah. I mean, it's just good to have things in order." I took a sip. "Things are in order." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I met with Mr. Pennington this week." The color drained from his face. "Wait, why?" I smiled softly. "Because I realized something. If I don't matter while I'm alive, I sure as hell won't matter when I'm gone." And the look in his eyes told me. He knew something was slipping away. Something he couldn't buy back. There's a strange kind of power in putting your name on a line that tells the world what happens after you're gone. It's not about money, not really. It's about voice, control, dignity. And after everything, I realized that was all I had left. When I sat down with Mr. Pennington to rewrite the will, I didn't feel sad. I felt clear. As if a fog had lifted that had been there for years, maybe decades. I told him everything. About the ring, the party, the forged co-ownership papers, the cold dinners and empty chairs. He didn't say much. Just listened, nodded, and asked, "Do you want to leave them anything?" I thought about it. Thought about the day Harold and I first moved into this home. We were just kids, really, 23 and scared out of our minds. But when we stepped inside holding hands, the walls didn't feel empty. They felt like opportunity, like promise. We painted every room ourselves, built the garden together, installed the swing out front for Mason before his 3rd birthday. That same swing now hangs crooked and unused. A ghost of childhood. No, I said softly. They've already taken more than I ever planned to give. The next day, I opened the cedar trunk in my bedroom. Inside were old documents, yellowing photographs, and Harold's leather-bound journal, one he kept only for me. He used to write me notes when we were young. After Mason was born, the notes turned into letters. Then, when he fell sick, the letters became instructions. Little details. Gentle wisdom. There, between folded pages, I found one that simply said, "If they forget who you are, remind them gently. But if they remember and still choose cruelty, walk away with your name intact." Harold had always known the difference between being quiet and being weak. That day, I began writing my final letter. Not to Mason. Not to Dana. To myself. It began, "Dear Helen, you are not invisible. You are the bricks of this home, the soil of that garden, the laugh behind every photo frame." I spent the following days reviewing every asset I had. The house, the savings, the cabin in Wisconsin that no one had visited since Harold died, the furniture I had preserved, the wedding dress I kept sealed in plastic, the gold-plated flatware we never used. And I gave it all away. Not out of bitterness. Not revenge. I chose to donate the house to a local women's shelter. The same one I had quietly supported for years. The cabin would go to the Youth Arts Foundation Harold once taught painting classes for. The furniture? To a program for foster homes. The dress? Donated to a vintage bridal shop that gave free gowns to low-income brides. I didn't want applause. I wanted peace. The tea I sipped each night no longer went cold. I drank it while listening to the wind on the porch, writing in my diary, or sometimes just humming old songs Harold used to play on the piano. One evening, while flipping through the photo album, I paused at a picture of Mason at age 10 grinning, cake on his chin, holding a card that read, "You're the best, Ma. I love you to the moon." I ran my finger over the picture. That little boy, he was gone. But he had once existed. And I had loved him with every fiber of my being. What came after? The silence, the selfishness, the betrayal. That wasn't mine to carry anymore. A week later, Mr. Pennington came by with final copies. I signed with a steady hand. This is a powerful statement, Helen," he said, sliding the pen back into his jacket. "You've thought this through." I smiled. "I'm not trying to send a message. I'm just finally telling my story in full." He nodded. "And what happens when they find out?" I looked out the window, where the garden bloomed in stubborn August heat. "They'll say I was cold, ungrateful, maybe even cruel." I turned to him. "But at least this time, the silence will be mine." That night, I found myself standing in the hallway again. The cracked wedding photo frame sat where it always had, tilted slightly on the shelf. I took it down. The glass was still split, a single jagged line through Harold's smile. I pressed my thumb gently against it. Then I went to my desk and opened a drawer. Inside was a new frame, one I had bought months ago but never used. I placed the photo inside it carefully, smoothing the corners. And as I clicked the back into place, something inside me clicked too. No anger. No grief. Just closure. Because the next time they came to visit, they'd discover just how much I remembered, and how much I had taken back. It was a Sunday afternoon when they came over unannounced. Dana stood on my porch holding a box of takeout and wearing that same fake smile that never quite reached her eyes. Mason trailed behind, phone in hand as always. The baby was with them this time, their firstborn. My grandson. I hadn't seen him in 3 months. "Hey, Ma," Mason said, barely making eye contact. "Thought we'd drop by. Dana brought lunch." As if lunch could fill the cracks in everything they'd broken. "Hope that's okay," Dana added, brushing past me into the house without waiting for an answer. They sat at the table like they owned the place. Like the chairs molded to their shape better than mine ever had. Dana unpacked boxes of chicken salad and bread rolls onto the tablecloth I had stitched myself decades ago. I sat across from them, quiet, composed, watching. Dana chatted about the baby shower, about colors and catering and seating. Oh, and I figured you'd be okay sitting with the older relatives, right? Less chaotic. We're doing this whole modern lounge setup in the front for our friends. There it was again. A polite erasure. I nodded slowly. Sure. Mason looked up from his phone. By the way, about the house. I talked to a guy who said it might be smart to transfer the deed soon. You know, for tax reasons. We could get ahead of probate. I blinked. Just like that. No emotion. No softness. No, are you okay with this, Ma? I set my fork down. You talked to a guy? Yeah. Real estate attorney. Said it's pretty common for families to plan ahead. I stared at him. So you're already planning my death now? Mason stiffened. Come on, don't say it like that. No, I said, voice calm but sharp. Say it how you meant it. Dana let out a tight laugh. It's not that serious, Helen. We're just being smart about the future. I stood up, walked to the sink and poured out my untouched tea. The sound of it trickling down the drain was the only sound in the room. When I turned around, I smiled. You know what? You're right. We should plan ahead. Dana blinked. Wait, seriously? Oh yes, I said. I've already started. I've been making a lot of changes lately. Sorting through things. Finalizing paperwork. Mason looked nervous. Like what kind of changes? You'll see. I didn't say it with malice. I said it with clarity. Because at that point everything was already in motion. That night, I pulled out the envelope Mr. Pennington had given me. Inside was the finalized will, notarized and witnessed. The house deed now assigned to the women's shelter in my town. They were already planning renovations for transitional housing. The bank accounts directed to youth art programs and food banks. The life insurance? Split between 3 charities that had once helped me when Harold passed. Everything accounted for. No loose ends. No open doors. And I had kept one more thing aside. A letter. Handwritten. Sealed in an envelope addressed to Mason. It sat quietly in the drawer beside my bed. 2 days later, I stopped by the women's shelter on the east side of town. It was a modest building, with peeling paint and the smell of old paper and hope in the air. The director, a kind woman named Marissa, welcomed me like family. I had volunteered there on and off through the years, mostly behind the scenes, cooking meals, sewing torn clothes, quiet things. When I told her about the house, she froze. You're donating your home? I nodded. It needs life in it again. Real life. Laughter. Struggle. Healing. Not entitlement. Her eyes welled with tears. Helen, this will change lives. I smiled softly. That's the idea. Later that week, I returned home and pulled down the tea set I had boxed away years ago. The one Harold gave me for our 10th anniversary. I polished each piece gently, then placed it on the sideboard. I brewed a pot of jasmine tea, lit a candle, and set 2 cups on the table. One for me, one for memory. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own home. I felt like the author of my own ending. The ring may have been gone, but I had taken back the story. And soon, they would realize the future they were planning for wasn't theirs to claim. They came back sooner than I expected. It was a warm Thursday afternoon. I was pruning the rose bush Harold planted by the porch, the one everyone thought had died years ago. But it bloomed again this summer. Small, stubborn, and unapologetically alive. I was clipping a pale pink blossom when I heard the car pull into the driveway. Dana's SUV. Too new. Too loud. Too fast. I stood, wiping my hands on my apron just as the door slammed. Mason marched toward me, jaw tight, eyes darker than I'd seen since he was a teenager. Ma, what the hell is this? He said, holding up a letter, the one the lawyer must have mailed. Dana followed behind him, sunglasses still on. Are you seriously doing this? Giving everything away like we don't even exist? I didn't speak. Not yet. Mason shoved the letter into my hands. You're cutting us out of the will? The house? Everything. Why? Why would you do that to your family? My family, I repeated quietly, doesn't call me unless they want something. Dana snorted. Oh, come on. Don't get dramatic. I looked her dead in the eye. You sold my wedding ring. She rolled her eyes. Still with that? It was sitting in a box. It wasn't yours to touch. Mason stepped between us. It was a mistake, okay? We should have asked. But that's no reason to. No, I interrupted. This isn't about the ring. That was just the last match. The fire started long before. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. You want to know why? I said. Let me ask you something first. CTA number 2. Would you forgive? Or finally walk away forever? Reflective beat. I didn't ask it as a weapon. I asked it as a mother who once thought love could cover everything, even being invisible. I motioned toward the porch swing. Sit. Mason obeyed. Dana hesitated, arms crossed. You remember when your father died? I asked, sitting across from them. Mason nodded slowly. You were 6. I had $300 in the bank. I worked nights, Mason. I walked to work in the snow because the car battery kept dying. I skipped meals so you could eat. Do you remember any of that? He didn't answer. Of course you don't. Because I didn't want you to. I wanted you to feel safe. Loved. I gave you everything I had. And I never asked for anything in return. Dana rolled her eyes again, but Mason looked away. He was starting to understand. You could see it, the slow, sick recognition settling into his gut. You stopped calling on my birthday. You left me off your family holiday cards. You let your wife humiliate me at her party while you said nothing. And then you sold the one thing I had left of my husband, not even out of desperation, for a gift, a present. It was a mistake, he said again, softer this time. No, I said firmly. It was a decision. The silence after that felt long and heavy. I stood and walked inside. They followed. I went to the drawer and pulled out the final documents, the signed, witnessed, and sealed will. I placed them gently on the table beside the photo of Harold in his military uniform. Dana grabbed the top sheet and skimmed it. Her voice cracked. You're giving this house to a shelter? Yes. What about your grandson? She snapped. Don't you want him to have something? I turned to her, eyes calm. I gave him love. I gave him a safe mother. The rest is up to you. Mason stepped forward, voice shaky. Ma, we can fix this. I looked at him. My son. My boy. Grown now. Lost. I hope so, I whispered. But not for my sake. They left soon after. No more shouting. No slamming doors. Just silence. The good kind. The kind I could sit in. Breathe in. Trust. But I knew the storm wasn't over. Not yet. The real fallout was just beginning. No calls. No texts. No surprise visits with pie. Just silence. But not the lonely kind I used to fear. This silence was earned. Like still water after a storm, like breath after labor. It filled the house not with absence but with space. Space for me. For the life I had once put on pause. I woke up earlier. Walked the garden before the sun got too high. Cooked real meals for myself, not toast and tea but full breakfasts with eggs and toast and fresh fruit, like I used to make for Mason when he was little. The house felt mine again. I rearranged the living room, dusted the baseboards, polished Harold's old record player and put on Billie Holiday as I folded laundry in the afternoons. And I didn't feel guilty for the peace. Until the letter came. It arrived 3 days later. A thick envelope, no return address again, but I knew the handwriting. Mason's. Inside, a single sheet of paper torn from a legal pad. No greeting. No apology. Just 10 short words. If you die alone, that's on you. Not us. I sat at the table and read it once. Then twice. Then I folded it neatly, stood and walked to the fireplace. I lit a match. The flames caught quickly. I didn't watch it burn. I turned away. Because even fire doesn't deserve that kind of company. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I walked to the hallway, took down the cracked photo frame one final time, and gently removed the picture of Harold holding baby Mason. I kissed Harold's forehead in the picture. I tried, I whispered. God knows I tried. Then I slipped the photo into a new frame. Clean, intact, whole. I placed it on the mantel beside my tea set. That corner of the room now felt sacred. Not like a shrine but like a promise kept. The next morning I got a phone call. It was Marissa from the women's shelter. There's someone here who says he knows you, she said gently. He's crying. Holding a letter. Says he didn't know the full story. I blinked. What's his name? Mason. I closed my eyes. I had wondered how long it would take him to see the truth. "Tell him I'm not home right now," I said softly. "But I'll write him a letter." "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "Some messages are clearer on paper." That evening I sat down and wrote. Not to scold, not to wound, but to tell the truth. "Dear Mason, you were once the best part of my life. You were a boy who brought me wildflowers and made me believe I'd done something right. I raised you with love and you taught me joy. But as a man you taught me something harder. That even the deepest love cannot survive without respect. I forgive you not because you've earned it, but because I no longer want to carry the weight of your choices. This home will belong to women who know what it means to fight for their dignity. Just like I did. If you want to find me, start by remembering who I was. Love, Mom**. I sealed it. Handed it to Marissa the next day. She said Mason waited in the shelter lobby for 2 hours crying quietly. But I didn't ask her to describe it. I didn't need to know. Let the silence teach him now. Let the space speak louder than anything I could say. He thought the worst had passed. But the real lesson was still to come, and this time the whole world would see it. The day I truly let go wasn't dramatic. No thunderstorm. No slammed doors. No shouting through tears. It was just me. Sitting at the kitchen table, spooning sugar into my tea and realizing that I no longer needed to be part of their plans. Because for the first time in a very long time, I had one of my own. It started with a memory. A simple one, barely even a moment. Mason must have been 7. We were sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes and packing paper, getting ready to move into this house. Harold had just passed, and I was trying so hard to smile for Mason's sake. He held up a crayon drawing stick figures, stars, and a crooked little house. "This is our new home," he'd said proudly. "You, me, and Daddy in the sky." I remember choking back tears and hugging him tight. Back then, he believed in magic. In home. In us. And I believed that love could stretch across any grief. But magic fades when respect dies. And that house, this house, could no longer hold a love that wasn't returned. That's when I knew. My new plan wasn't revenge. It was freedom. I started spending my afternoons at the women's shelter. Not just donating, volunteering again. Helping with intake. Making meals. Sitting with women who reminded me of myself at 29. Frightened, overwhelmed, but resilient. I met a girl named Lacey, 18, newly pregnant, left behind by someone who said they'd love her forever. The way she looked at me when I handed her a clean set of bedsheets, it was like no one had ever done something that kind for her before. And it hit me. There are people in this world who still need what I have to give. Just not the ones I gave everything to. I kept writing in my journal. Each day a new entry. Not about pain. Not about betrayal. About beauty. The smell of cinnamon in the morning. The first breeze through a freshly opened window. The way the porch creaked in the same spot every time I stepped out barefoot. I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Alive. Then one morning as I was organizing the attic, I found a small box I had forgotten. It was labeled Letters to Future Helen. I opened it. Inside were notes I had written to myself over the years in difficult moments. I had started the tradition in my 30s, always writing as if I were talking to a friend I hadn't met yet. One note stood out. "Don't let love blind you to neglect. When they stop seeing you, you must see yourself harder." I smiled. That version of me, younger, exhausted, unsure, still had fight in her. Still had clarity, even when the world tried to drown her out. And that's when it struck me. I had never really been alone. I had been accompanied by every past version of myself. Every woman I had to become just to survive the next phase of life. And each one had left behind a breadcrumb of wisdom. Now it was my turn to leave something behind, not for Mason, not for Dana, but for women like me. So I did something bold. I called the local newspaper, asked if they'd be interested in a guest editorial. "What's the topic?" the young reporter asked, polite but distracted. "Respect," I said. "And what happens when a mother stops begging for it?" I spent 3 days writing the article. I told my story without names. No blame. No scandal. Just truth. About the cost of invisibility. About the shame of being loved only for what you can give. About the quiet victory of reclaiming your voice. It went viral. Women from across the state wrote letters. Some sent flowers. Some offered stories of their own. One wrote, "You helped me stand up from a chair I'd been sitting in for 20 years. Another simply said, "Thank you for saying what we all feel." And in the midst of it all, I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. Not because anything had changed, but because I had. I didn't wait for Mason to call again. I didn't watch the mailbox for a second apology letter. I didn't even glance at Dana's social media to see if she posted about me. Instead, I planted new flowers in the garden, tulips and marigolds in creeping time. I painted the fence a soft gray blue, like the sky before morning. And I walked through my home as if I had just moved in. Because in a way I had. And just when I thought the chapter was closed, life handed me the final page I never saw coming. It happened on a Tuesday. I was sitting on the porch with a warm cup of tea and my journal open to a blank page, when a small blue car pulled into my driveway. It wasn't Mason. It wasn't Dana. It was Lacey. She stepped out slowly, cradling her round belly, her eyes wide with a kind of nervous hope I hadn't seen in years. She wore a wrinkled t-shirt, too big for her, and her shoes looked worn through at the soles. But her face was open. Honest. Hungry for something she wasn't sure she deserved. I stood. She hesitated. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling. They said you might be okay with me stopping by. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't hesitate. "Come in, sweetheart," I said, stepping aside. "Let's get you off your feet." That day changed everything. I set her up in the guest room, the one Mason used to stay in. I washed the sheets, opened the windows, let in the light. I made a pot of vegetable stew and we sat at the kitchen table, bowls in hand, talking quietly. She told me about the father of her baby, a boy who had disappeared as soon as the pregnancy test turned positive. She told me about her own mother, already gone before she turned 15. She told me about the shelter, the job she tried to hold on to, the panic attacks that came when she imagined giving birth completely alone. I listened, not because I had answers, but because I understood. And when she finished, I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. "You're not alone now," I said. Her lips quivered. "Why are you being so kind to me?" I smiled gently. "Because I know what it's like to be forgotten. And I know how dangerous that kind of silence can become." The next morning, I pulled the final letter from my nightstand, the one I had written months earlier, addressed to whoever comes after me. I had written it in case the house sat empty after I passed, in case the world didn't care what happened to it. But now I handed it to Lacey. She read it, tears filling her eyes. And then she whispered, "You're giving me this house?" I nodded. Not just the house. A chance. A future. A place to write your own story. The official transfer took place 2 weeks later. Marissa from the shelter came by. So did Mr. Pennington, briefcase in hand. The papers were signed on my kitchen table, the ink drying slowly as the late afternoon sun stretched across the floor. "You sure about this?" Pennington asked one final time. I looked at Lacey, sitting across from me, hands folded protectively over her belly. "Yes," I said. "She's family now." That weekend we held a small gathering. No banners. No cake. No catered lunch. Just a few women from the shelter, a neighbor or two, and a soft breeze that carried laughter through the open windows. I made lemonade. Lacey brought out a tray of warm biscuits she had baked herself, her first time trying. They were lopsided, a little burned, but they were hers. She looked at me shyly. "It's not perfect." I grinned. "Neither am I. But somehow we're both still here." That night I sat on the porch again, tea in hand, and watched the lights flick on inside the house. The baby's room was almost done, yellow walls, hand-me-down crib, a mobile made from painted stars and strings. And in the living room Lacey was humming softly, folding baby clothes. The house finally had a heartbeat again. But it wasn't Mason's. And that was exactly right. Motif closure begins. I looked down at my teacup, no longer cold. Still warm. Still comforting. And for the first time in years I didn't dread the next sip. I embraced it. But just as I began to settle into peace, the past came knocking one last time. It was early evening when I heard the knock. Not the soft, uncertain kind Lacey made when she first arrived. This knock was heavier. Hesitant but familiar. I knew before I opened the door. Mason stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes sunken. His voice was low. "Hi, Ma." I didn't move. Not right away. Behind me, the kitchen was full of soft music, the scent of fresh bread rising from the oven. Lacey was inside, humming to the baby and folding laundry on the table where Mason once drew with crayons. He followed my eyes. "She's living here now?" I nodded. "Yes." "Is that legal?" "It's more than legal," I said quietly. "It's right." He looked down at the porch boards. "I didn't come to fight." I waited. He looked back up at me. "I came to understand." I let him in. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed to look him in the eye when I said what I had to say. We sat at the same table where I used to serve him pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, where I cried over college bills, where I packed his wedding gift in gold paper and tied it with ribbon while holding my breath, hoping I'd still matter afterward. Now he sat across from me as a man looking for something he didn't know how to ask for. "I read your article," he began. "The one about mothers. And respect. I knew it was you even though you didn't use names." I didn't respond. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. I didn't know you felt that invisible. "You didn't want to know," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." He nodded. "You're right." Silence settled again. Didn't feel cruel this time. Just honest. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "About the ring. About all of it." "I know," I said. "But sorry can't buy back what was stolen." He looked up again, eyes watery now. "Why her?" he asked. "Why give it all to a stranger?" "She's not a stranger," I said. "She's someone who sees me, who says thank you, who doesn't treat love like a transaction." "But she's not family," he said, almost pleading. "She is now." He flinched like the words struck something he didn't expect. "I raised you, Mason," I said softly. "I gave you my hands, my time, my youth. And I would have given you my future, too. But you gave it away, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for me to hold on to." He buried his face in his hands. "I didn't mean to." "I know," I said. "But you did it anyway." CTA number 3. "Tell me, is respect more valuable than money?" Reflective beat. I asked him what I had been asking myself for months. Not because I wanted an answer, but because I needed him to feel the weight of the question. He stayed for only a little while longer. Long enough to hold the letter I had written him again. To look around the house like it had already become a museum he couldn't touch. On his way out, he stopped on the porch. "I won't ask for anything else," he said. I hope one day you'll want to see your grandson again." I nodded but said nothing. Some things weren't up to him anymore. Some bridges burn too slowly to notice, until you're already on the other side. That night I sat on the porch swing and watched the stars bloom across the sky. Lacey joined me, her hands resting on her belly. "You okay?" she asked. "I am," I said. For the first time in a long, long while. She leaned her head on my shoulder. And together we sat in the silence Mason once feared, but I had finally made peace with. Because the final chapter wasn't his. It was mine. And I wasn't done writing it yet. The name wasn't mine. But I chose it,